Welcome to the Lessons from Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Brian Beckcom. My next guest is former United States Marine and former oil and gas executive Robert Bobby Harrington. In the show, Bobby and I talk about leadership exclusively, including why the most important part of leadership is personal character and integrity. But leadership doesn't just mean leading other people, it means leading yourself too. And Bobby has a book out called Lead You, which explains in detail how you must start your leadership journey with yourself. You simply cannot lead others until you have mastered yourself. Bobby Harrington is an American patriot and the definition of a leader of character. I hope you enjoy the show as much as I did, and now I give you United States Marine Robert Bobby Harrington. Hey everybody, this is Brian Beckcom, and I have got Bobby Harrington on the show. Bobby, how you doing today, man?
Man, Brian, I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Like I said at the beginning in the introduction, everybody, Bobby is a former United States Marine. Actually, I probably shouldn't say that because the Marines, you're once a Marine, always a Marine. Bobby Harrington is a United States Marine. He's also an oil and gas executive. He's the author of a book, Lead You, a great book on a lot of different topics related to leadership and things like that. Bobby, I'm really happy to have you on, man. How you doing today?
Man, doing great. Glad to be here and ready to talk leadership.
Semper Fi, brother. I'm not a Marine, but I was in the Corps of Cadets at Texas A&M. My dad,
awesome.
my granddad, my mother, my uncle, and my older brother were all in the military. So I've got a ton of friends that were in the military, and I have, because of the way I was raised, I have the utmost respect for United States military and the Marine Corps in particular. So thank you for taking the time to be on the show. Before we get into the weeds on some of the services and some of the things you have to offer, Bobby, I thought maybe it would be a good idea. We're talking about leadership today. Why don't we define what we mean by that?
Yeah, leadership's a lot like love and trust, hard to define. You find a lot of different definitions.
Yeah.
But like love and trust, it's a verb. Okay. So if I had to boil leadership down to one word, it would be action, right? And if I had to give you a phrase, it would be taking the right actions to accomplish a task or project or mission, right? And, for me, what does good leadership look like? Well, it's treating people how they want to be treated. It's growth and development of people, and it's delivering the plan. Or accomplishing the mission, whichever one, whether you're in the military or the civilian world. So hope that helps.
Tell us a little bit before we get too deep into the book and some of the other things, your consulting services, things of that nature. Tell us just a little bit about how you became a Marine, how you became an oil and gas executive, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, no, good opening. So, I have to go back to the beginning and give my parents all the credit. My father was a World War II, Korea, and Vietnam veteran, 3 times in Vietnam. So, I learned an immense amount of leadership from him, albeit not necessarily in a structured way, but the way he carried himself, the decisions he made. He never complained. And then on the other side, my mom, she's from Eastern European descent, right, from Yugoslavia, and just really, really tough people. And so she always had high work standards and performance standards for us. You didn't leave a task undone. If you wanted to go somewhere, you had to do work. And it better not be beneath you as a male to vacuum the floor or dust or anything like that, because, if she said do it, you pretty much did it. So that's where I learned how to work and have a work ethic. And, from there, I was involved in athletics in school, football and track.
Nice.
I was fortunate enough to be a football team captain my senior year. So that's kind of the first time that I felt the weight, of leadership. Like, okay, what do I do? Thankfully, the folks that went before me were good team captains, so I emulated, what they did. And then went to college, washed out of football, and grades weren't so good. Wasn't really focused on grades during college. I was focused on playing football.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, normal story. Yeah. So, I said, I always wanted to serve, whether it's, in the public or the military or what have you. And it's like, well, I'm young. I don't know really much about public service. So, let me lean on what dad did. He had a great career and fought in a bunch of wars and, worked out good for him. So I decided to join the Marine Corps. And, I remember the day I told him, he just shook his head. He's like, son, why don't you go in the Air Force, do something like that, fly a plane or be in strategical air command. I said, no, I said, I want to be a sniper. He just shook his head.
Wow.
So, I joined the Marine Corps. I joined as a grunt, but they make me a combat engineer, which is sort of like a grunt, but you work with demolitions and blow things up and stuff like that. And that was just, it was neat. But in the Marine Corps, they teach leadership in a very specific way. They teach traits and values and stuff like that. And, that stuff is not something that you're taught once and then, okay, go apply it in whatever, like once you are in the Fleet Marine Corps, your subordinates, your peers, and most of all, your superiors are going to give you feedback on your leadership performance, right?
Yeah.
So the Marine Corps demands you to lead from Jump Street, right? So that was my baptism, sort of into leadership, was the Marine Corps. And, I've kept a lot of those principles and traits, close to me throughout my 34-year journey. And it worked out well for me. So that's how I got into leadership. And I firmly believe that leadership is something you have to have a passion for, because it's hard. On the easiest day, it's hard. So if you don't have a passion for it, you're just not going to be a good leader, right? You
100%.
just become a manager. You just become a manager, right? You're good at processes and all that stuff and setting the table. But leadership takes a different, type of individual. You have to like it, and you have to like the suck, and you have to like the bad days. And like a lot of my peer leaders, they bemoaned people problems, but I love people problems. People problems never bothered me at all. It interested me, actually, and after you solve enough of them, you kind of have a template for what's going on. After a couple of decades, someone comes to you with a problem, and it's for me, it's pretty easy to solve. Just solve it constructively, and don't ask what happened or who did it. Ask, how did this happen, right?
Yeah.
So you're not automatically putting people on a fence.
I've been super lucky in my life, Bobby. Probably it sounds like you, in having some unbelievably good mentors, starting with my father. My mother died when I was 10 and my brother was 8. My dad was a major in the Air Force at the time. And raised us as a single father while flying 200 combat missions over Vietnam, winning the Distinguished Flying Cross, and ultimately becoming a high-level member of Air Force intelligence. But I when I was younger, Bobby, so very similar to your dad. When I was younger, I didn't really know what it was. I noticed that there were people all over my neighborhood that looked up to my dad, and like they called him the Colonel. And my dad's a 6 foot. He's not 6 foot anymore because he's 80 years old, but he was a 6'2" 200-pound Greek god, physically imposing, and
love it,
and just a great, but just a really somebody that people just wanted to be around. Some people, and he's still like that today. And I could never really. And when I was younger, I didn't even think about this because I was too immature. But why? What was it about my father that people liked so much? And one or two of the things that I've noticed as I got older is that just exactly to what you said. My dad used to tell me it's not how you treat the judge, it's how you treat the janitor. And you need to be willing to do every single thing that the people you're leading are willing to do. And they notice that. And, it's not what you say, it's what you do. And I actually had my dad on the podcast a couple of years ago, and he talked about a lot of this stuff. But a lot of these things, Bobby, it's been super cool talking to people like you and my father and some other military folks and folks not in the military, because what I've found, and I want you to comment on this, is fundamentally, people were kind of saying the same thing about leadership, whether they were in the military or whether they were a New York Times author or politician or business person or lawyer, whatever. There's these fundamental principles, one of which I kept hearing again and again is good leadership is about serving the people that you're leading. So comment on that if you don't mind a little bit, Bobby.
Yeah, again, start at 70,000 feet. I always felt that if I served people, they would serve the company or the mission better.
Yeah.
Right. And serving is not being subservient, right? It's serving the needs of the people you're privileged to lead. And that's one thing my dad told me is like, look, leadership's a privilege. It's not a right. Be fair and firm, but you've got to treat people right if you want to get what you want, out of them. But I started out, playing football, so that's aggressive, right? So there was in the Marine Corps, and that's really aggressive. And I was a linebacker, so that's really aggressive.
Really aggressive, yeah.
You get where I'm going with it?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Early in my life, I was a pretty aggressive leader, quite aggressive. But after the Marine Corps, and then working in oil and gas as a contractor, and then finally becoming an employee of Chevron, this big conglomerate corporation. I sort of had to learn to tone that down and polish, a little bit. But, along the way, there was a point where I became a servant leader, right? When it finally clicked in my head and it got really big, because here's the thing, like when you get into a big leadership position, say it's, you got a team of 100 people, you got a $20 million budget. That's big stuff right there, man. And you got to make a decision who you're going to be as a leader. What's going to be your leadership character, right? And instead of the authoritative, part or dictatorial part, I thought it better to be a servant leader and just, again, treat people how they want to be treated, try and grow them and develop them. And, together, we can accomplish pretty much anything, if you do that. And I've seen that with my own eyes in the military and in the civilian sector. When you serve people, they'll do anything for you.
One of the coolest things about, I think, the military and my experience in the Corps of Cadets is that everybody in the military, everybody in the Corps of Cadet, they're not the best leaders. There's great leaders and there's bad leaders, and you get to observe all different kinds of leadership styles and pick and choose which ones suit you best. When I started becoming a lawyer, I worked at a small firm. I went to work at a big firm for a couple of years, like I thought I was supposed to, and then I went to a smaller firm, and there were two partners. One partner was frankly the world's biggest asshole, and the other partner was kind of the opposite. And the partner that was super duper aggressive, I would literally have meetings on Saturday mornings, and he would go step by step and make me these 300-400 bullet point tasks. Let's do this. The other partner, I'd walk into his office and he would say, I trust you. If you have any questions about any of these cases, come ask me. Otherwise, let me know when you've won the case. And it was a completely different style of leadership. One was complete micromanagement, and one was basically total hands-off. But the interesting thing, Bobby, what I found was I worked far harder for the partner who trusted me, because I felt like that I had an obligation to earn his trust and continue to deserve his trust. Whereas the other partner, the only thing I did was what he told me to do. I did nothing extra because I was like, okay, I got to do boom, 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 boom. So totally different styles of leadership. And I think, what are your thoughts on leaders giving trust to their people, like doing things and saying things to indicate, I trust you to do the work?
Well, you stole a little bit of thunder there, but you've just articulated the quintessential tale of two leaders, right? So the first guy is overbearing, he's judgmental. He's giving you these bullet tasks. You color outside the lines. It's like the world's on fire. And the other guy, the key thing, the one key thing in that whole discussion you just articulated is he extended trust.
Yeah.
He even went so far to say, I trust you. And when people say they trust you or they extend trust in a certain way, they're saying, hey, I like your character and I like your competence, or I like both of them, right? Because that's how, I'll double down on Covey's definition of trust, one part character, one part competence, right? You either have really good character and you're a stand-up person, or you do something really, really good, right? And that's, the second leader you had there, he did it the right way. I mean, he probably knew what he was working with because he knows that it was about people, right? And not about him. Whereas the first leader, it was all about him and how can people serve me, right? Yeah. He saw people as assets, where the second leader, saw you as someone that, hey, I'm working with something here. Maybe I can unlock his potential. So let me see what he can do. Let him go for it.
One of the things, so you've got, for lack of a better phrase, a coaching business or a consulting business called Stronger You Coaching. And for everybody that wants to check out Bobby on the internet, strongeryoucoaching.com. One of the things that you talk a lot about, Bobby, both in your book and in your coaching practice, is unlocking confidence in people, like giving people the confidence to lead. And, as somebody who's in the Marine Corps, somebody who's had some military upbringing, maybe it's a little bit easier for people like us to step into.
Welcome to the Lessons from Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Brian Beckcom. My next guest is former United States Marine and former oil and gas executive Robert Bobby Harrington.
What specific
in the show, Bobby and I talk about leadership exclusively,
in their own
including why the most important part of leadership is personal character.
That's a great question. Well,
but leadership doesn't just mean leading other people; it means leading yourself too.
You can't get any better than
Bobby has a book out called "Lead You."
So you give someone a task, they accomplish that. You give them a little bit harder task. Then you make it a little bit more complex.
You simply cannot lead others until you.
But as far as for developing new leaders, it all starts with a framework.
American patriot.
Right? First thing I teach is character traits. Justice,
I hope you enjoy the show as much as I did,
enthusiasm,
and I give you
stuff like that.
United
Those things
States
matter.
Marine,
And people are always looking at
Bobby
that.
Harrington.
Then there's
this
principles and values.
And I have got
Bobby
also do
Harrington
this
exercise.
Bobby, how you doing today, man?
In any workshop, Brian, I'm doing great. Glad to be here. It's just
like I said at the beginning in the introduction,
so I get people sticking.
Bobby is
okay.
Former United States Marine. Actually, I probably shouldn't say that because the Marine,
after about
once a Marine, always
10 seconds. It's okay.
Bobby Harrington is the
down,
United States
seconds,
Marine.
Pins down.
He's also an oil and gas executive. He's the author of the book Lead You,
and most people,
a great book,
have one, maybe two,
a lot of different,
and usually no one has five.
So things like that. Bobby, I'm really happy to have you
right
on
there.
How you doing today?
Would you sail the ocean without a compass and a map, ready to talk leadership? Of course you would.
Semper Fi, brother. I'm
how
not
can you
a Marine,
expect to go on a lifelong leadership journey with no compass? Awesome, right?
My granddad.
So what I'm trying to say is that
my older brother,
leadership traits, values,
and I've got a ton
those
of friends
are your compass of where you're going, right?
Because of where I was.
One of the first things I teach too is that when you develop character traits and you select values,
in particular. So thank you for
have
taking
to live
the time
that,
to be on the show.
right?
Before we
you have to pick something
get into the weeds on some of the
you have to stay sovereign,
services,
right?
Because
at some point
you have to offer. Bobby,
our values
maybe it would be
will
a good
be
idea. We're talking
in tension
about leadership
with
today.
some outside force.
Why don't we define?
We're going to have to
mean by
choose.
that?
Do I maintain my integrity? Right now. Leadership's a lot like love and trust, hard to define. You find a lot of different definitions, even when it might be a bad outcome for you. Like love and trust, I can sleep better at night. Okay, so if I had to boil leadership down to one word, it would be trust myself, right? For me, if I had to give you a phrase, it would be taking the right actions. I would accomplish a task to be perfect, or a project, chapter in my book dedicated and perfect. Chapter for me, what does good leadership look like? You don't have to be treating people how they want to be treated. Right, it's growth and development of trying to be perfect, and it's delivering the plan. It's a road to self-destruction, accomplishing the mission, whichever.
Really
hope that helps. You're in the military.
Yeah, no, that helps a ton, and I'm really glad to hear you talk. Tell us a little bit before we get too deep into the. Now, I don't want to sound like an old dude. Some of the other things, your consulting services, things of that nature.
Tell us just a little bit about society. Maybe don't put how you became an oil and gas executive, character, and I'll give you a specific example of what I'm talking about. This was a number of years ago.
Yeah,
I put a post on
good opening.
Social media.
So, I have to go back to the
considering
beginning
voting for a
and give my
political
parents
candidate, do you look at their
all the credit.
policies or do you look at their character?
My
first? And the vast
father was
majority
a
of people
World War
said their
II,
policies, and I was
Korea,
extremely
and Vietnam
disappointed in that,
veteran,
because
3
my
times
view
in
of it
Vietnam.
is,
So,
if they,
even
if they
I
have
learned
policies, all of
an
which you
immense
agree with, if they
amount
have
of
bad
leadership
character,
from
the
him,
second they get in a
albeit
room with
not
somebody with
necessarily
some
in a
money that's
structured
going to
way,
change them,
but the way he carried
they're going to
himself, the
change their
decisions he
policies.
made,
Their
he
policies
never
have no
complained.
foundation.
And
Whereas somebody
then
with some
on the other
character,
side,
I don't really
my
care that
mom,
much, to be honest with you.
she's
Bobby,
from Eastern
about the
European
day-to-day
descent, right from
policies, as long as I
Yugoslavia, just
know
really
they
tough
have good
people.
character, as long as I
And
know
so
that they're coming from a
she
good
always
spot.
had high
So
work standards
it
and
really is
performance
heartening
standards
to
for
hear
us.
you talk about
You
character
didn't
first.
leave a
I
task
can't
undone.
go,
If you want to go
we
somewhere,
can't go past
you
that,
had
though,
to do
without
work.
talking about some
And
specific
it better
traits
not be
that you
beneath
think
you as a male to
are
vacuum the
important for
floor or
leaders.
dust or
One of
anything
the,
like that.
as you were
Because
mentioning,
if she
the
said do it,
exercise with the
you
Post-it
pretty
notes,
much
I
did
was
it.
thinking
So
about
that's where I learned
what
how
I
to
would
work
write
and
down.
have a
It's
work
funny
ethic.
'cause
And
I thought of
from
two,
there,
and then I
I was
kind of couldn't think of
involved in
anything.
athletics in school.
You know what I
football
mean?
and
So
track.
it's
So
a good
there you go. I
exercise.
mean, I was fortunate.
It's just
something to think about. Football team captain
For sure.
So that's kind of the first time. If we go back to chapter 1, of leadership, and how I came up with all this is when I wrote the book. Thankfully, the folks that went before me were good team captains. So I emulated, what they did. 53 now, and then late 51. Went to college, washed out of when I was 45. I had a really big success inside the company, but big success wasn't really focused on grades during college. Was focused on playing football, cracks and flaws, and things that are wrong. Right? Yeah, and normal story. Worked on something for 8 years straight, and won't get into that. I always wanted to serve, but it was wildly successful, public or the military or process. I burned out. It's like, well, I'm young. I don't know really much about become a public service provider for my family instead of a leader. Let me lean on. And Dad, I was overseas. Didn't have a nervous breakdown, but I had a rock bottom moment. Worked out good. Sat on the side of my bed, crying. Join the Marine Corps, and stuff like that. I remember the day I had to have a hard conversation with myself. He's like, "Son, why don't you join the Air Force? Do something like that." And the more questions I asked, being strategical air command, I had to be a sniper. Man, after I did, I was glad. He just shook his head. So between that and writing the book, I had to reflect, I joined the Marine Corps. My whole, I joined as a grunt journey. They make me a combat engineer, and which is sort of, man, it all goes like back grunt, to work with demolitions and blow things up and stuff like that. It's just the foundation. That was just of everything. I just don't see how people can. But in the Marine Corps, not they teach leadership in a very specific way. So values change. They teach traits, and when you're younger, maybe you're really stuff like that. And that stuff maybe not so much. Something that you're taught once takes and then ambition, go apply it and whatever. My values have changed. I mean, and there's some that stay with you through life. You are in the fleet, hard work, definitely subordinates, your peers, and most of all your superiors are going to give you feedback on your leadership. But depending on what phase you're in, I communicate to people that, hey, the Marine Corps demands you to lead from Jump Street, and what values are going to align. So that was my baptism, that goal. Sort of into leadership. And this goes back to was the as individuals and leaders, I've kept a lot of those principles and traits. You have to chase something throughout my 34-year journey and your passion, and it worked out. Why are we here? For me, so that's how I got into. You're here to achieve. It's a leadership and develop your. I firmly believe that leadership potential. Something you have to have a passion for. I can't tell you how many people I told. It's hard. On the easiest days, you are. So if you don't have a passion for it, but you're just not going to be a good leader, right? You understand what I'm saying? Just become a manager. Yeah. Like they're capable of way more good at processes and all that stuff, but setting the table, achieving down here to leadership. Yeah, they're running circles around these other type of individual. You have to like it, and your lid is like 4 or 5 levels higher than the bad days and. And like a lot of my peer leaders,
so many good things.
They bemoan
that last comment you made. I had an experience in college.
I love people problems. People problems never bothered me at all. It interested me actually, and after you solve enough of them, you kind of have a temper for what's going on. The first test I took, I made a B, and the professor called me in his office and he said, it's you mailed that. For me, it was you're way better than that. I know you're way better than that. Solve it constructively. And you didn't give it your best effort, and I'm disappointed. Don't ask what happened or who did it. ask,
my God,
how
Bobby,
did
that
this
stuck
happen?
with me. I mean, I'm
Right.
talking about it
So
for
you're not
35
automatically
years
putting
after
people
the fact.
on a fence.
Well,
That shit is hard, man.
I've been
on the
super
final,
lucky
I
in
made
my life,
110.
Bobby. I put everything I could put into it, and it was because
good mentors,
he was right.
starting with my
He was
father.
right.
My
I
mother
did
died
dial
when
it
I
in,
was
and
10,
that's not
my
my
brother was
nature.
8.
That
My
is
dad
not the
was
way
a
I
major
want
in
to
the Air
be.
Force at the time.
But you said a couple other
to raise
things
this as a single father
that I think
while
are worth
flying
talking about as
200
well.
combat
And one of
missions
those
over
is this
Vietnam, winning
idea
the
of
Distinguished
compass.
Flying
And
Cross.
so
And ultimately,
I'm one of those people that I've,
becoming,
for
a high-level
many
member of
years,
Air Force intelligence,
had New
but,
Year's resolutions.
you know,
And then
I
when I was younger, Bobby, a couple years ago, doing New Year's resolutions, and I realized, and the reason I
when I was
stopped,
younger,
Bobby,
I didn't
was
really
because I
know
wasn't
what it
reaching
was.
them. But now I do them
I
again. And
noticed
I
that
call
there
them
were
challenges
people
now.
all over my
And
neighborhood
the observation that
looked
I've
up to
had, and
my
I want you
dad.
to talk about
And,
this just
like,
a little bit, is
they
it's
called him
not
the current.
about
And my dad's a
necessarily
6 foot. He's not
goal.
6 foot
It's
anymore
about
because he's 80 years
pointing
old. But he was
yourself
6 foot 2 inch,
in the
200
right
pound
direction.
Greek
It's a compass.
guy.
Like my
Physically
challenges
imposing.
when I turned 50
and
last year,
and
I had three
just a
that
great,
major
but just a
challenges,
really
two of which I reached,
somebody
and
that
one of
people
which
just
I
wanted to
didn't.
be
But all
around.
three
Some
of them,
people,
and he's still like that today.
pointed
And I
me
never
like a
really
compass in the direction.
When I was younger, I didn't even think about
that I
this 'cause
wanted
was
to
too
go.
mature. But
So
what was it?
talk
Talk a
about
little
my
bit
father
about
that people
that
like
as
so
far
much
as
relates to
you know,
leadership.
because
One
I
or
think
two of
that's
the things
really,
that
really important.
I've noticed as I got older is
Yeah, I mean,
that
so
just
you
exactly
don't drive a
what
car
you
by
said.
looking
My
in the rear
dad
view.
is not. My
Okay.
dad used to tell me,
Let's
"It's not
think.
how you
Let's
treat
think
the
of a
judge;
mountain,
it's how you treat the janitor."
and our
And
goals
you need to
are
be
on
willing
top
to
of
do
that mountain.
every single thing.
And those are the
people you're
things, the
leading
3 to
your
5
labs
things,
do,
or
and
1
they
to 2
notice
things
that. And
that are important
you know,
to
it's
us.
not what you say.
Now, to get there,
It's what you do.
we can't fixate
I
or
actually
focus
had my
on the
dad
top
on
of
the
the mountain.
podcast a couple years
You got to
ago.
break
I
that
talked about
down
a
into
lot of this
10
stuff, but a
like
lot of these things, Bobby,
subtasks or 10
been
wickets
super
we got
cool
to
talking
pass.
to people like
And
you,
we look at the
my
next
father,
wicket,
and some other
right?
military folks.
We don't look 2
and
wickets
folks
ahead.
not in the military.
We don't
'cause what
think
I
about,
found,
hey, when I get to the
and I
top of
want
the
you to
mountain, it's going to
comment
be
on
all
this,
that. Because
is
guess what? It's not.
fundamentally,
when you get there, guess
people
what?
were kind of
People
saying
are
the
trying to
same
knock
thing
you
about
off, take your
leadership.
job.
Whether they
And
were
you know
in the
what? When you
military
look down,
or
it's a
whether they
long way
were
down.
New
It's a
York
long way to
Times
fall.
author,
So it's harder to stay there
politician, or
than to
business
get there.
person, or a lawyer,
But
whatever.
yes, you
There's
must be
these fundamental
pointed
principles,
in
one
the
of
right
which
direction. And as far as
I
for
kept
goal
hearing
setting,
again and again,
um,
is good leadership is
I'm going to
about
somewhat
serving the
agree
people
with
that you're leading.
not accomplishing
So,
all your goals,
comment on
because
that if you don't mind a little bit.
if you have any elements
Yeah,
of passion or
again,
starting
aggressiveness,
70,000 feet, you're going to set big
I always
goals,
felt that if I
right?
served
really big
people,
goals.
they
Right,
would
like
serve
every
the
time I go to
company
work
or
out, I
the
say I'm gonna do all this.
better.
I never do it.
Yeah.
Right, but I
and
I give it all I can to get there. Right,
Right?
it's
It's
serving
serving
the
the
needs. I'm not
of the
mailing it
people
in.
you're
I'm
privileged to
working my
lead.
butt off.
That's one thing
my
dad told me. He's like,
I'm
look,
not getting 20
leadership's
steps
a
on
privilege.
squats.
It's not a right.
Maybe I'm getting
You know,
15.
fair and firm.
Yeah, yeah. But
like as
you've got
a
to
person
treat
who
people
is
right
driven
if you
to
wanna-
achieve will
if
always
you-
set
you want to get what
too
you
many
want.
goals.
They
You know,
won't
out
make
of
all
them.
of them, and that is the beautiful thing about.
I started
learning
out
to
playing football,
compartmentalize,
so that's
learning what's
right?
really
So
important
Marine
to
Corps,
you,
that's really aggressive.
and then
I was a
making
linebacker, so that's
fit for
really
purpose
aggressive.
plan,
Really
you know,
aggressive,
sort of
yeah.
to
You
get where I'm going with it.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, the first bullet
earlier in my
flies,
life,
or
I
you
was
get
pretty
punched in the
aggressive
mouth,
leader.
like Mike Tyson
You know,
said. It's all going to
aggressive.
change,
Sure.
but you have to have some framework of a plan
to get
after
where
the
you're
Marine
going.
Corps, and
Right.
working in oil and
Just real
gas.
quick,
as a
my favorite way to
contractor,
plan
and
is,
finally.
the corporate
becoming
world,
an
they call
employee
it
of
strategic
Chevron, this big
blueprinting,
conglomerates,
where you
corporation.
start with the end.
You know, I sort of had to learn to
what is
tone
the
that
second to
down
last
and
step?
polish.
Was the
know,
third to
a little
last
bit,
step.
but
Just go all the way back to where
along
you
the
are
way,
at this
there was
moment.
a point
For me,
where
I find
I became
that, a servant leader.
that
Right.
helps me
When
see
it finally
goals
clicked in
clearly,
my head, and
it helps
it
me
got
see
really
big.
incremental goals.
You know, because I love
Because here's the
incremental
thing,
goals. I
like,
know eventually
when you get into a big leadership
if I put my
position,
head, say it's
you know, you
into
got a team
something
of
and I
100
want to
people, you got a
pursue
$20
it,
million
I'm going
budget.
to do it.
That's big stuff.
Now,
Right
how
there,
fast
man.
I do it,
And
you know,
you got to make a
is
decision.
another discussion.
Who you're going to be as a
But
leader? What's
I'm
going to be
so
your leadership
convicted
character,
to
right?
it, and
That I'm not going to look
authoritative
at the goal or what it feels
you know,
like when I get
part
there,
or
because
dictatorial part.
I've already been to a few
I
places, so
thought
I know
it
what
better
it feels
to be
like to
a
serve
servant leader. I actually love going after people how they want to be treated, doing the small things that it takes to get to the next week, together, and then to the next, and then to pretty much anything, if you do that. And I've seen that with my own eyes in the military and
you said something
the
earlier in
civilian
our
sector.
conversation about how
When you serve people,
some of your
they'll do anything for you.
and some of your priorities. One of the coolest gotten older, and I've noticed the exact same thing with me. And my experience in Corps Cadets, I was like, well, maybe my priorities were everybody in the military. Everybody, I mean, I was a little bit. They're not the best leaders. There's great leaders and there's bad leaders, and you get was focused on doing the best I could in my career, and over the last 5 or 6 years, my focus has changed dramatically. Which ones suit you best? And I've kind of realized, Bobby, it's not all about me. Like nobody is going to care. I went to work at my deathbed. What kind of car I drove? What they're going to care about? And then I went to a smaller people. And two partners. Sometimes I think about one partner. I think about that, Bobby. I think about that, and I think, man, I was immature. And the other partner, I didn't know what I was talking about. But maybe it's okay. To be a little partner that was super duper aggressive. Maybe it's okay to be a little literally have meetings driven in their career to be a little bit younger. Where I think people get off step by step is when they're 51 like I am in 2 days, or 53 like you, do this, and they're still acting like they're 30 years old. Like this. Like, in other words, your values, I'd walk into his office and he would say, but they should change.
They have to
have any questions. They have to change. And I think that's such a good observation. Otherwise, because let me know one of my goals in life, Bobby, is to get less completely different style of leadership. As I grow up, I want to be more micromanagement. I want to one was basically total hands-on I have, because the interesting thing, Bobby, what I found was, and I think far harder. One of the things I've noticed, Bobby, partner who trusted me, because I felt like as I've had an obligation, they're kind of two different types of people. They earn his trust and continue to deserve his trust, whereas calcifying and their positions. The only thing I did was what he told me to do. I did nothing extra, because I was like, it's almost like they've lost their free agency. And then I see another group of people, so totally different styles of leadership, and who are getting more mature psychologically and cognitively. And I think that's what you're talking about when you're talking about how your values doing things change over time. So let me ask, I trust you to do leave this topic of value.
You sold a little bit of thunder there, but
what do you personally, in your experience,
you just articulated
what are the two or
quintessential tale of two
value
leaders,
traits,
right?
You see,
so the first guy is overbearing, judgmental,
whether it's your Marine
giving you these bullet tasks,
gas
you color outside the lines. It's like the world's on fire.
To serve people,
and the other guy, the key thing, the one key thing in that whole, well, the first one is to develop some sense of genuine humility. You just articulated, yes, he extended trust. People like to throw that word around. He even went so far to say, "I trust you." You know, unless when people say they trust you or they extend trust in a certain way, they're saying, "Hey, I like your character, and I like so many times in my life, or I like both of them." Right, because that's how I'll double down on Covey's definition of trust. You never one part character, one part competence. Everything, but right? You either have really good character and you're a stand-up person. So humility is one really, really good. Right? I think, and that's being aggressive. Second leader you had there. He did. When I say aggressive, I don't mean personally aggressive. He probably knew that you wake up with some fire because he knows it was about people.
You got a little juice,
right? And not about him. You got to have some enthusiasm. Got to have some passion. It was all about smell and how can people serve. Like in the military, right? He saw people as assets. Where the second leader, how suck the task is. Saw you as someone that, hey, enthused. I'm working with something here. Call it motivation, fake motivation, whatever. Let me see what he can do. Let him go for it. Humility, some enthusiasm, a little bit of fire. And it goes without saying, people say integrity a lot, but obviously, that's part of it.
For everybody that wants to check out Bobby on the internet,
now
StrongerYouCoaching.com.
What I want to rely on
that you talk a lot about
in a junior
Bobby,
leader,
in your book
specifically,
and in your
is dependability.
Practice is
right. When I'm working my span of control, when I hit the button and I need someone,
as somebody who's in the
I want to know when I hit that button, I'm recalling some juice.
Maybe it's a little
that person's got to be there. Dependability. I mean, it's everything, and that, there's a lot of stuff wrapped up in that, trust,
confidence in people that
is big and all that, but
leadership experience at all.
Got to be dependable.
What's
and it sort of goes without saying that, your best leaders are going to take accountability. They're going to take ownership, of their mistakes. Great question. Well, repetition is key. It's asking, how did this happen? You can't get any better than inoculation. Right.
Talking about
you give someone a task, they accomplish that, give them a little bit harder task, make it a little bit more complex.
Matter of fact, I trained at lunch.
As far as for developing new leaders, it all starts with a framework.
Black belt, right? But it has taught me, it has reminded me of how important it is to have some humility. And I tell you what I see, Bobby, in the jiu-jitsu gym is I see there's two types of people that come in. There's people that come in like me, and I'm 6'1", 210-pound former college athlete. And the first time I go in there, I get my butt kicked by a 45-year-old bald Jewish guy who I'm 5 inches taller than and outweigh by 40 pounds. And half the people in the world, that'll happen to them and they'll be so embarrassed they'll never come back. And then, but my mind frame was, oh my God, this is like magic. I got to learn how to do this. And so it was like a year of just getting my butt kicked again and again and again and again and again. But it's so good for you psychologically. It's so good for you to have a little humility, particularly, Bobby, particularly when you're in a position like you are, or I am, where we are kind of our own boss. And if we don't put ourselves in those situations, there's nobody out there teaching us humility. The other thing that I could not possibly agree with you more strongly about is the idea of passion or fire. And like you said, it is absolutely contagious. And I have a saying, I tell all my lawyers this: passion persuades. That's what persuades people. Now, you don't want to be an idiot and be, too crazy about things, but people can tell if you mean what you are saying. People can tell if you care about what you're saying. If you don't care about what you're saying, if you don't care about your client, if you don't care about your case, if you don't care about this business deal, people know when you're faking it. They know when you're pretending.
For sure.
And they also know when you really mean it too. And there's all sorts of videos on YouTube about, there's these people that have come out and they'll, hello, my name is John Smith, and I'm here to talk to you about XYZ PowerPoint stuff. And then they'll come out 5 minutes later. Hello, everybody. How are y'all doing? I'm so excited to be here. And the difference is night and freaking day. So how do you, it's easy to talk about passion. It's easy to talk about having a little bit of juice or a little bit of fire in your belly. What do you tell your clients who are looking to develop that passion, looking to develop that fire? What do you tell them? How do you get that? Or is it one of those things that's either there or it's not?
Well, it's a mixed bag. First thing I do is I say, okay, let's examine, because usually when folks are smart enough to ask for help, they know they need help, right? And they're pursuing this big goal. So we look at their goal and we start examining how much desire they have for that goal, right? And that usually uncovers, whether they have the passion for it or not. And here's the thing. If you're pursuing something big enough, you're going to be challenged on the way up the mountain, right? Your desire is going to be tested. Your grit's going to be tested. And if you don't have it, you're going to walk back down the mountain, right? And sometimes people find out, well, I'm pursuing this for the wrong reasons, right? I have passion for this outcome, but I don't have passion to do the things necessary to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
What a great observation. What a great observation.
No,
what
it's
a
the truth,
great observation. What a great.
Yeah.
Everybody, I want you to pay special attention to what Bobby just said, because that is one of the best things I've heard in a long time. You may have the passion, or you think you may have the passion for some ultimate goal, but if you don't have the passion to take the steps that are necessary to reach that goal, maybe you don't really have the passion you think you have, right?
100%. And a lot of people come to that realization, and it's actually a positive thing for them, so they can find something else that they're willing to, go through hell to get, because anything big, any big goal, you're going to go through a little bit of hell to get there, right? Or it wouldn't be a big, scary goal, right?
Can I tell you a little story about that?
Absolutely, man.
Okay. And I might embarrass myself a little bit, but when I started jujitsu at 47, after a couple months, I got a stripe on my white belt, and it's just a piece of tape is all it is. But I was driving home that night from class and I started crying. I couldn't stop crying. I was so happy. And I called my dad up, because he's the guy that I share those kind of things with. I said, I can't stop crying. I'm so happy because I reached a goal that was super, super hard at 47. I had to fight through a lot of pain and a lot of struggle and a lot of humiliation and a lot of getting choked in order to get this piece of tape on my belt. But what I realized, Bobby, was the reason that I was so overjoyed by it is because it was hard. And I had to work for it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm at the stage in my life where I can do a lot of things that are temporarily satisfying. I can open that $100 bottle of wine or drive that expensive car or go on that expensive vacation. And those are fun temporarily. But I'll tell you what really gives me the most fulfillment is the stuff that is super hard. And
absolutely, man.
That's what it's about, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, let me polish off that thing about passion. We've lost sight as a society and a civilization. We've lost sight of the concept of delayed gratification, right? Yeah. We often uncover when working with people that have no concept of delayed gratification. And it's because that's how they were cultured in this new society of expectations, right? And we can have a big discussion about expectations. I was talking with someone the other day. I said, okay, because they were struggling with something. They're struggling with expectations, outside expectations. I said, okay, let's examine it. I'm a root cause person. You have spousal expectations, you have company expectations, you have cultural expectations, right? Yeah. Societal. So that's 4 or 5 I've rattled off. I said, when do you ever consider your expectations? And man, the light went off.
Love it.
We have to be our own best self and fulfill our own expectations before we start taking on, all these other expectations. And really they're unrealistic, right? And I write about that in chapter 10, chapter on perfect. Nothing's perfect. Social media shows people at their best. Movies are perfect. You can write things down that are perfect, but when we interact as human beings and we behave and we do things, it's not perfect.
Yeah. I had you're talking about looking yourself in the mirror and stuff. I had an eye-opening experience this last year. I was in San Francisco federal court for a month trying a very difficult, very expensive, big time case. And I remember at the beginning of the deal, man, I really didn't want to be there. I got to be honest. I got 3 kids back at home in Houston. I didn't want to be away from them for a month. And I had an opportunity there I was still going to do my job. I was going to do a good job. But I was kind of like subconsciously resisting putting my whole heart and soul into the deal. And I had this realization that nobody would know. Nobody would know if I didn't put my heart and soul into this case other than me. And that's what was important. What was important was not whether I won or lost that case. What was important was that I could look myself in the mirror when it was over with and said, I gave it everything I fucking had. And after that, the results really don't matter that much, do they? Yeah. And I think a lot of people lie to themselves about that sort of thing. Bobby, I mean, back to the story about my English teacher. I dialed that in and he called me on it. And the second he called me on it, he was 100% right. And I felt like crap about it because I did dial it in. And so, people talk all the time about, give it your best shot, got to be able to look yourself in the mirror, stuff like that. I never really appreciated that until this year. And the notion is, hey, nobody may know that you weren't trying your best, but you're going to know.
But that to me, that's the worst. Yeah. Because like you're right. No one would know. You can lie to people. Most of the time they won't know. Some people are really, clever. They know, but how much can people live with? I don't function that way. I'm not perfect, but if I'm accountable for something, I got to give my best. Yeah. If it takes 12, 14 hours, whatever it takes, whatever I agree to, I got to do it and I got to do it with excellence. For me, there's no other way to work or to act or to behave. It's just not.
That's a perfect segue, by the way, into your book, which, by the way, everybody, the book is titled Lead You, which I think is a fantastic title, by the way. Tell us a little bit about the book. First of all, what made you want to write it? And then second of all, without giving up all the contents of it, tell us what the message that you really want people to get out of the book is.
Yeah. So a few years before I retired, just felt like the next phase of my life was coming, going back to values and waypoints. I think the waypoints for me were like 27 when my daughter was born, 30 years old when I started a company, 35 when I had a bankruptcy and hired with Chevron, and 43 and 48. For some reason, those 2 years felt like I gained some wisdom. And I said, okay, I'm going to be retiring soon. I don't know exactly when, but it's going to be in the next few years. What can I give back? How can I pay it forward? And when I examine, my life, of course, there's technical things that I can do, and I do some of those things, teaching and whatever. But wow, I had the privilege to have 2 good parents. I had leadership training in the Marine Corps. I've had leadership assignments the whole way through, and all in operations and execution. I have something to say, right? So then I did some research, and I learned that there were 60,000 leadership titles on Amazon. I said, okay, okay, Bob, okay, you want to write this book, but what are you going to say that hasn't been said already?
Yeah.
So I wanted to do something different, and so I started thinking critically. Well, everyone wants to lead everybody else. Everyone wants to lead the world, but guess what? People have to lead themselves first.
Yeah.
You have to start with yourself. So I said, okay, I'm going to write a book about self-leadership. And my good friend Sean Roach, he's like, you need to write a series of books. And I said, okay, well, that makes sense. So yes, we've written Lead You, but I plan on writing one on leading teams and organizations as well. And finally, the last one that I'm really passionate about is leading through change, right? Because change is omnipresent, and the rate of change today is just mind-boggling. And people who do not learn to lead themselves or teams through change will fall by the wayside very quick. We saw it during COVID. That's another discussion. So I said, okay, I'm going to write a book on self-leadership. And, it starts out with my story. When you write nonfiction, they say, okay, we don't want too many, what did they call them? Interesting digressions. But I do tell some of my story because it's important to the reader. When I was 45, we sort of touched on it, had a little breakdown or, come to the universe type of conversation. And it forced me to think critically and review my whole life, and in my faith, belief system, my family, my fitness, physical condition, and then, my financial planning, right? Because it's sort of nearing, retirement. So what was that going to look like, So in examining all that, there were some flaws and, things I wasn't doing. So now systematically for the last 8 years, I've been working on that. But, the book is framed in such a way where it tells my story. It starts off with a conversation. And the neat thing about the book is there are some real life anecdotes in it. There's no theories or concepts, anything like that. In the end of each chapter, we have some homework, for people to do. So they actually put the teachings, or they can put the teachings into practice. So it starts out with the conversation. We talk about character first. We move into values. We start talking about self-trust, which is the precursor to self-belief. Right. And then we talk about what it means to be committed. There's a difference between commitment and compliance. Compliance is I have to. The commitment is I want to. And that all funnels into discipline. We talked about chapter 10, perfection. And we also have a chapter on self-care, which, for the better part of my life, I was not good at. Until I reached 45 and I learned to start really taking care of myself. I was always fit, always worked out. But it's more than that. It's mental 100%. Fitness as well.
100%.
And when I was 45 was when I really leaned hard into compartmentalization, right? To put 1 or 2 things at the front of my mind each day, and I'm not going to worry about the rest. You're just not going to worry about it. Because it doesn't serve what I'm trying to do. Right. And that's a hard thing to do, especially, when you got a lot of things going on in your life. You have a family, you have a financial plan, you're trying to work. You might have a physical condition, and then layer on top of that, you got this work thing where, you got a $34 million budget and 120, 150 people to lead. You're working with an executive group, working with a technical group, over there. That's a lot to juggle for one person. And there's probably thousands of examples like that. But for me, it got so heavy and so big, I had to force myself to learn how to compartmentalize, to succeed at a very high level. Right.
The amazing thing about it, and you said a lot of great things there, Bobby, but the notion of not only training yourself or leading yourself physically, I think most people nowadays appreciate the value of good nutrition, good sleep, getting some sort of exercise, movement. People know that that's important. I think where people maybe miss the boat on that, though, is they think, well, if I'm doing that, I'm being selfish. And I would argue that you're actually, if you're staying in good shape, exercising, eating well, getting good sleep, you're actually doing everybody you lead, your family, your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, you're doing them a favor. But the second thing you said, which I think people are not good at, is exercising your mind and your the spiritual component. Whether you believe in a certain religion or not, I think everybody has some spiritual component.
Sure.
So for me, Bobby, that was about 10 years ago, that was meditation. And I started meditating because I was having all sorts of panic attacks and crazy thoughts. And I felt like my mind was basically out of shape. And so it doesn't have to be meditation. There's a lot of different things you can do. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is taking care of yourself physically is not enough. You got to take care of yourself psychologically. You got to take care of yourself spiritually. You got to take care of yourself from a spiritual standpoint. And you have to do that first. I mean, the analogy that I always think about, Bobby, for everybody that's listening, that's like, well, that sounds kind of selfish because I got kids and a family I got to take care of. It's just like when you're on the airplane and they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first. If you can't breathe, if you don't have good oxygen, you're not going to be able to help anybody around you. If you're psychologically damaged or out of shape, if you're not training your spiritual side, then it's like not putting your oxygen mask on first. So it's not a selfish thing to take care of yourself. As a matter of fact, it is one of the most selfless things you can do to take care of yourself as a leader. So what a great comment there. Bobby, let me ask you, because I told you I would be on the deal for about 45 minutes and we're going an hour right now. Let me ask you if you could have one message to people about, and let me tell you where I'm coming from before I ask this question. I think a lot of people are worried about the future of this country. What they see online is they see a bunch of people arguing and fighting. They see a lack of maybe quality leadership at the highest levels. They worry about the direction of the country. What positive message would you have for people about what's going to happen in the future? And you mentioned something earlier about how the rate of change is increasing, and I agree with you 100%. It's an exponential curve, right? It gets faster and faster and faster and faster.
Yes.
So what are your views on how do we get good leaders in this country? What do we need to do to get good leadership?
Yeah, I don't want to get into politics. That's a messy subject, and that kind of mars that kind of turns leaders into, I don't know what. I think a lot of people aspire to be leaders while they're politicians, and all of a sudden they turn into something else, and it's just unfortunate. But it starts with there's a couple elements to this. It's a good question. How do we get better leaders? It starts at home. If you have a child, start teaching them how to lead now. Don't wait until they're 24 for them to find it somewhere else. I was lucky. I had parents that taught me how to lead, right? Yeah. And not everyone has that. So why not teach leadership in school? Why not? In corporate America, even the company I work for, we had a few programs they called leadership. They were like 3 or 4 days, right? Yeah. It's more than that. Leadership should be taught in every business school, for those who go to college, and those who don't, those who pick up a trade, they should come to folks that provide leadership development. You have to have some type of I guess to boil all this down, people need to learn to lead.
Yeah.
And it starts with leading yourself.
Yeah.
Start with leading yourself first, and then learn how to lead other people. Right? That's how it starts. And don't be ashamed about saying, I want to be a leader, because you can automatically start leading yourself. Leadership is not a title or a position. Again, go back to the beginning of the episode, leadership is action, taking the right actions to accomplish the task or the mission. Right. And that's what I tell my son this, because he's young, he's 23, he's in California, he's an aspiring actor and going through all kind of trials and tribulations, and my daughter as well. And I say, look, every time you do something, every time you have an interaction, you have to ask yourself, am I getting myself closer to my big goal, or is this going to drive me away?
Yeah.
Or maybe stand still, but likely it's either going to get you closer or you're going to do something detrimental that's going to drive you away. So, asking, people asking themselves that simple priming question, does this get us closer to accomplishing the mission or whatever we want to do, or does it not? It's really as simple as that. And I'll add, a lot of people are confused about leadership and decisions, right? Inside of companies and politics and stuff like that. Always look to see who the decision serves.
Yeah.
And that's going to give you a lot of context on that specific leader, right?
Yeah.
Now, you don't know all the backstory, but you don't need to know it. You only need to know a decision was made, and these are the positives or the negatives. And so who does that serve, right? They're serving the greater good. Okay. If they're self-serving, or serving a particular interest group, well, that's a red flag. Sorry. Again, not asking for the world to be perfect, but, as long as we have people that are going to look the other way, we're going to stay in this crisis of leadership, and there is a crisis of leadership. I'll argue that with anybody. Yeah. Look at politics, look at religion, look at civic organizations, look at companies, all this stuff going on with Bitcoin. I mean, they got two of those guys in the last, few months.
Unreal. Yeah, unreal.
And we're not talking like, grandma's $10,000 Social Security saving. We're talking about billions of dollars, man.
Billions of dollars.
Yeah. Like the one guy, they had to hire a special guy, a money hunter, to determine where he hid all the money. As if the crime's not egregious enough, they don't know where to go to get the money.
Yeah.
And
that gets back to what we were talking about earlier, Bobby. It starts with character. And
100%, man.
And that problem with Bankman-Fried and the crypto deal that was just basically all a sham was a character problem at the end of the day.
Of course it was.
And I know people hate talking about that nowadays. They don't want to talk about character. They don't want to talk about values. But let me tell you something. That's where leadership starts. That's where 100%. It starts. It starts with character and it starts with values. And if we're not talking about that first, I don't want to hear anything else you have to say. Because if you don't have that solid foundation, you don't have those values and characters, nothing else you do really matters. Because one day you'll think one thing and the next day you'll think the next thing, and you can't be depended upon and you're not reliable. But if you've got that bedrock of character and values, what you're talking about, things like service to others, things like loyalty to your people and your mission, things like dependability. When I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. Those kind of values, that's where it all starts. Well, Bobby, man, what a great talk. Everybody, the book is Lead You. It's a great book. First thing I'm going to do when I get off the show is order a copy. The reason, again, that I like this book so much is because I think that's where it all starts. You cannot lead other people until you lead yourself first. Go to Bobby's website, StrongerYouCoaching.com, StrongerYouCoaching.com. You can read about all the other services he provides. Bobby, it's been a true pleasure having you on the show. Keep doing what you're doing, man, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Brian.